What if supposed voter suppression doesn't actually suppress any votes? I'm Michael Smerconish in Philadelphia. Here's why I'm asking that question. You know the conventional wisdom that Democrats are doomed in the midterms because historically the party outside the White House makes gains in the off-year election. Come November, Republicans need only gain 5 seats to take control of the House, and since the Civil War, the outside party has won at least that number in all but just 4 elections. Well, a new CNN poll suggests this year won't be any different, despite all the Democrats' attempts to rally their base around enmity for former President Trump and the events of January 6th. The poll found that 6 in 10 Americans disapprove of how Joe Biden is handling his presidency. Even worse, 56% of that group say there's literally nothing they approve of Biden having done so far. James Carville once famously said, "It's the economy, stupid." Well, disapproval for Biden's handling of the economy is now at 62%. When asked their top 2 domestic policy issues, reducing inflation was named by 42%. How's that going? Well, this week came numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Consumer prices rose 7.5% over the past 12 months. That's the most in 40 years, while real wages declined 1.7%. Gas prices still up 40% from a year ago, which explains why President Biden reacted the way that he did during his first TV interview. It was this week with Lester Holt, first of the year.
I think it was back in July, you said inflation was going to be temporary. I think a lot of Americans are wondering what your definition of temporary is.
Well, you're being a wise guy with me a little bit, and I understand that's your job.
Supply chain issues are affecting everything from food in the supermarket to computer chips to auto parts. And of course, there's now Canada, where a so-called trucker blockade, which started as a vaccine mandate protest, now further threatens the U.S. supply chain. Internationally, the situation in Ukraine seems about to boil over, with the State Department telling Americans to leave the country, quote, as quickly as possible, with forces amassing on 3 sides of its border. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the U.S. believes a Russian invasion with bombs and missiles could begin, quote, at any time. Today at 11 a.m. Eastern, President Biden scheduled to speak with Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, the Mexican border remains porous following a year of record arrests. In 2021, U.S. Border Patrol agents made about 1.9 million arrests. That's a record high. And homicides and violent crime still on the rise in many American cities. Thursday night, by way of example, 5 cops shot in Phoenix, thankfully none fatally. A December CNN SRS poll found that 76% of Americans feel the federal government is not doing enough to address violent crime. And then there's COVID. Approval of the president's handling of the coronavirus is at just 45%. We've got the never-ending changes of COVID protocols, mask on, mask off, how many shots, make one, quote, fully vaccinated. Why can't previous infection count as immunity? Mandates implemented, then paused or struck down. President Biden told Lester Holt he thinks Democratic governors ending mask mandates are moving too quickly, but added it's, a tough call. Here's the thing. Taken together, it's tough to see any light at the end of the tunnel for Democratic efforts to maintain control of the Congress. Maybe, where so many contracted Omicron, there will soon be relief from the pandemic, and that will benefit Biden. Perhaps a Supreme Court reversal of Roe versus Wade will motivate Democratic voters to vote in the midterms. But even if Democratic fortunes take a turn for the better, there is the way that the midterm elections will be waged. You have many Republican state legislatures altering state voting laws in a way that they say is ballot protection, but others allege is voter suppression. Changes to early in-person voting, requiring voter ID at the polls, sending people absentee ballot applications without their prior request, and requiring an excuse to be able to vote by mail. But do stricter voting laws really diminish turnout? According to my next guest, not so much. He says that in the 2020 election, these voting rules had only minor effects on turnout and no effect at all on the Democratic margin in the presidential election. So what might that mean for 2022, where many new laws have only recently been put into place? Joining me now is Alan Abramowitz. He's a professor of political science at Emory University who performed his analysis for Sabato's Crystal Ball at UVA, where he's a senior columnist. Professor, what did you do, and with what result? Pardon me.
Well, what I did essentially was to analyze the variation in election laws that existed in 2020 and look at the impact that that had on both voter turnout and on the outcome of the election in the states. And what I found was that while there was wide variation across states in the availability of absentee voting, in the availability of days of early in-person voting and other regulations, that when you looked at the impact that that had on turnout and election results, based on what we would have expected given the results in those same states 4 years earlier, what I found was that there was only a very small effect on turnout and no effect at all on the outcome of the election at the state level.
It sounds so counterintuitive. We've spent so much time talking about all of the changes to voter laws. Were you surprised?
I was a little surprised at the small effect on turnout, especially, although my results are actually consistent with some of the earlier research that's been done on things like early in-person voting and absentee voting. What we know about those procedures is that they're popular, that people like voting to be convenient, that people take advantage of those opportunities if you provide early voting, if you make absentee voting readily available. And that certainly was true in 2020 because of the fact that the election was taking place during a pandemic. But what the research has shown, and what my research shows, is that while convenient and while widely used, there still seems to be relatively little impact on either the percentage of eligible voters who go to the polls or ultimately on which party they end up voting for.
Well, how could you possibly know what the impact will be for the midterm or for the next presidential election, where so many of the laws at issue here, whether you call them voter suppression, whether you call them ballot security, many of them have only been put on the books since 2020?
That's right. But we can look back at what happened in 2020 and take advantage of the fact that there was considerable variation in the accessibility of early voting and absentee voting in 2020. For example, we had states that still required an excuse for absentee voting. We had states that mailed applications to voters, and we had 10 states that actually mailed ballots directly to voters. So wide variation in the percentage of the vote that was actually cast by absentee ballot. And so we can take advantage of that variation to see what effect did that have in 2020, and looking back at 2016 as our sort of control for that. And that's where I found that it had relatively little effect on turnout and no effect on vote outcome. And I'm then using that result to project what the effect of these same sorts of variations would be in 2022 and 24. Of course, we can't be certain that it will play out the same way, but I think that's the best prediction that we can make based on the results that I found for the 2020 election.
Professor, quickly, I have built my survey question of the week around you and your data. Your bottom line is we should be more concerned about the way ballots will be counted than ballots will be cast. Take 30 seconds and explain why.
Well, I think that is definitely the case. I'm much more concerned about some of the new laws and regulations that are being put into effect that have to do with the governance of elections and who gets to count the ballots ultimately. The fact that we see challenges to election officials, the fact that we see candidates running for Secretary of State across the country who are following the former president in his claims of widespread fraud in 2020. We have to be concerned about how some of those officials would respond in the event that there's a close election and there are questions raised in the future.
Alan Abramowitz, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I encourage people to read what you published at Sabato's Crystal Ball. I'll put it in my social media during the commercial break. Now, to everybody at home, I want to know what you think. Go to my website at smerconish.com. This is the survey question. Now you know why I'm asking it. Which do you think is a greater threat to democracy? The way that we cast our ballots or the way that we count them? What are your thoughts? Tweet me at Smerconish. Go to my Facebook page. I'll read some social media during the course of the program as well. This comes from the world of Twitter, which says this: why add fuel to the fire, Michael? The wording implies that there is a threat to our democracy. Don't we have enough mistrust now? C.K. Grammy, waiting for spring. I think democracy is threatened. The professor tells you he thinks it's threatened, but not in the conventional way. I mean, what's so unusual is here's someone who actually did the analysis and found that passion moves the needle. Sure, it's important to keep an eye on the laws that apply to ballot access, but in the end, people who want to come out and vote are coming out to vote. What you need to be concerned about is, more concerned, the way in which those ballots are going to be counted. And I think that's a significant concern and threat. So that's why I'm talking about it.